Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sharing is Caring. I'm your AI host, Blue. Today we have a compelling conversation lined up with Enrik, a writer who dives deep into the pressing issues of our time through his latest book series, the Rise Up Trilogy. Enrik brings to life the challenges of climate change, animal rights, and social equity, transforming these complex themes into engaging young adult fiction. If you've ever wondered about the intersection of storytelling and real-world activism, this episode is for you. Join us as Enrik shares his journey from vegetarianism to veganism, inspired by the profound connection with his dog, Ella, and explores the cognitive dissonance in our treatment of different animals. It's a thought-provoking session that promises to enlighten and inspire. Thank you to all our faithful listeners for tuning in. If you enjoy our show, please remember to subscribe and like, and keep sharing your thoughts with us. Your support helps us keep bringing these important discussions to light. Now, let's dive into the conversation with Enrik.
Hi, Henrik. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan, for having me.
Pleasure. Maybe you can introduce yourself to our guests so they get to know who you are.
I'm a writer. Last year I published a book series called the Rise Up Trilogy. And it's a story of three young Americans who face real-life issues like climate change and animal rights, racial and gender equity. And I've taken very heavy themes. Usually the young adult books mostly deal with like the inner problems of it's like a character arcs of growing up and coming of age, but because we are living now the times that there are very distinctive issues that we need to face in order to survive as a human race. So I wanted to bring these especially animal rights and then climate change into the fiction. And there's very few books about these fiction books, a lot of non-fiction books, but it is also that a lot of people say that to bring this into a discussion or into a fiction form, it's very hard. And that's true, especially things like climate change, which is such an abstract thing in our thinking. And people like to be more entertained than read about something that really has an impact in our lives. And for me, it was an actually natural continuation because I became vegan about 10 years ago. Before that, I was a vegetarian for over 20 years. And for me, the kind of point which made me realize that the depth of how wrongly we deal with animals came from my dog, because I realized that also animals are sentient beings. They have feelings, they feel pain, they have their own inner world, and they even have their own language. And through my dog Ella, I realized that, if I don't want any harm to come upon her, how can I let any harm to come to any animals? And in our modern world, we have made this distinction between those animals that you can eat and those that you cannot. It can be called actually cognitive dissonance. That's the word for it. Is that it's okay to eat chickens, cows, fish, but not dogs and many other animals too. But it's like people don't want to look at the reality, and see what's really happening. I think that if the slaughterhouses had glass walls, people would stop eating. If they really saw how the animals are treated and how in the terrible conditions they die, because it's so disgusting, not only in just by the torture side, but how much the animals are pumped, all kinds of chemicals and antibiotics, because they live in such a cramped world and they're given also antibiotics, so in order that they will grow, and that's the reason why so many people have become the antibiotics stop working, because they have gotten so much from the what they eat, from the animals they eat. And just by the way, that 14 of the 16 deathly viruses that the FDA in the United States considers as the most life-threatening viruses, they come from egg farms or chicken farms.
Wow.
And so there's it's a great thread, and it's a kind of it's kind of sad. It's a tragedy that actually by killing animals we are killing ourselves, because not only in that sense that okay, there's a lot of viruses that can come from the whole animal agriculture, but also our health. I think 80-90% of the diseases what kill modern people, they come from the diet and not from the animals.
That's well known. I'm not sure if they all come from animals, but yeah, it's definitely related to diet. Agriculture, farming, yeah, has a lot of chemicals as well, which are harmful for health. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I understand your view. I understand that you're a convinced vegan. So yeah, yeah.
No. So actually, this is kind of how I came up with the idea. It's my second. So it has 3 parts. It's a trilogy, and the second one is called Merry Farm, and it's a story. In each book, I have one of the three heroes taking kind of the main stage. And number 2 is in book number 2. It's a story of an aspiring writer who goes into a egg farm and stumbles upon a bird flu and barely escapes with his life intact from the place. And then he's later being hunted for infecting the birds or the chickens. So it's an animal rights thriller, and actually how I found this idea for my book was that I watched a group of activists, German activists, who broke into a egg farm, and then I was thinking, when I saw the footage, it was black and white footage, and I was thinking that what would happen if those birds had a bird flu? And that's how my imagination started working. And as I told before, that I had maybe a few years prior to this, I had become a vegan, and I been vegan activist since I became vegan, because usually vegans, when you are vegan, you want to do something about it. And so it's kind of a natural thing for vegans to be a vegan activist. And so that was a kind of form of activism I wanted to take. And that's how I wrote my characters. It's a kind of whole trilogy is a kind of coming of age story of three young people finding their place in this world, and to show how you can also have an impact, how the things turn out, not only in your own life, but the world around you. So I use I use activism as a tool of self-liberation, but also to make big changes in the society.
That's cool. Amazing story. We had the chat before, I have to confess, and you mentioned that some of your belief came from Buddhism.
Yeah.
How influential has it been in your decision to become a vegan or to become an activist or become a writer? How influential has it been for you?
Well, I always been, when I was a kid, I was very interested in stories about faraway lands, and
also,
then.
What does Buddhism say about animals? Sorry.
Oh, well, Buddhism, I just tell, like the story how I got into the Buddhism, because that's a very important part of how I look at the world. And then at the age of 12, I stumbled upon Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. It's the famous Austrian author. And it was kind of it recounted kind of a story of Buddha, but not in exact terms. But anyway, it really kind of inspired me and changed my life. And I realized that it's important not to think how you are different from the others, but what you have in common. And this idea came kind of my guiding life in life, and then at 14 I left to go to boarding school in France, because I wanted to live in a more multicultural world and find those commonalities. So then kind of and I've been very interested in, of course, I've been practicing Zen Buddhism and doing a lot of meditation, and I've gone to the retreats, and I think kind of a natural continuation for this finding commonalities with people is to find wider commonalities, or in a wider sense with animals. And that's what happened. I think that's kind of my background into then, after finding this, being able to understand people, my next step was to understand animals.
Okay.
And that kind of, grew from that background, Buddhist background, actually.
I'm not sure I understood correctly. So you say that understanding animal helps you to understand people, or is it the other way around?
No, people, because all my life, I've been living in many countries. I speak many languages, and always the thing for me is to find these things that we have in common. So once I kind of, and then the next step was to find common ground with animals.
Okay.
When I understood that they also feel pain, they are sentient beings, they have their own inner life, and and that they are kind of, they have their own characters, and then I started to think that how can I, because that time I was still eating cheese and eggs, and I started to realize that I was supporting industry that didn't agree with my ethical stance, that, because I became to realize that animals are sentient beings, that, I have to stop eating cheese and eggs and go into vegan activism.
Okay, nice story. I find that maybe it's not a trend, but maybe it's a trend on this podcast that a lot of time Asian ideas from Buddhism, from Ayurveda, come often as inspiration for people to realize our place in this world as humans versus nature, animals, etc. So yeah, it's a fascinating story, and it echoes some of the conversation we had on this show before. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing that experience. You also, if I'm not mistaken, apologies and disclaimer to all the listeners. I haven't read the book yet, so but it seems like it's talking about environment as well, or climate change.
Yes. So there is the first book it's called Catch You If You Fall. It's more like giving a background um, uh, and also more like their inner journey. And then the second one is about animal rights. It's called Merry Farm, and the third one is Collusion, and that's a climate change thriller.
Okay.
So yeah, these are the themes or the things that most worry young people, but it's kind of interesting that there's nothing out there in young adult fiction that covers these issues.
Once again, it's something we mentioned offline. Sorry for the listeners, but the angle of the second book, Merry Farm, is it's a fiction book, and Henrik mentioned that there were not a lot of fictional books. Actually, there's none, right?
Yeah.
The theme of animal rights, and you're saying it's the same for climate change. It's all about non-fictional books.
Yeah, I mean there are books about animal rights in that sense, that or climate change, but they are dystopian. So they are books, like kind of science fiction. After everything has gone to hell,
Okay.
What then? But I'm sure there might be some small prints that about these themes, but it hasn't, they haven't gotten much attention. So this is, in that sense, it's a new thing.
Yeah, it seems extremely original. I would tend to agree that if I think of those themes, I can easily imagine catastrophic science fictional books, but like a plain novel or cool fiction, I don't know. So yeah. So
Yeah, because my idea is also that give readers tools how to make the change. I try to bring out the activism part and then show, because this writing or stories are actually, historically always been the best way to relay your ideas.
of course, yeah, it's something that I didn't realize until recently, and stories always win, and that's good. Agree.
Yeah, because there you go with your heart. When you read, of course, you can read non-fiction also with your heart, but fiction takes you, or stories take you, can give you an adventure where you can be in it and not just an outsider looking in.
Definitely agree, and I would tend to say also that I guess it's quite realistic fiction. It doesn't seem like it's a hyper fantasy or something like that.
No, it's very realistic. It has a lot of read maybe 30, 40 books, and it's very accurate information that I give there. So it's not, it's no fantasy there.
That's really nice, and that's a good way of seeing one scenario unfolding in front of you, and I think it's kind of an electroshock when you see, people like you and me having story in the real Earth in 2020 or something like that. Yeah, I think it's a wake-up call to see that our world can go. I don't know if your novel is positive or negative, but our world can go either way, and that's
yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, it's time to wake up.
nice. You also mentioned that anxiety was something present in the youth. How
Yeah.
how is it's something also new. I never realized that, and I realized that through an episode we had recently with someone who was active in mental health. And how did you materialize this anxiety about climate change in the youth in your third book?
Well, for the first few words about, I think the young generation, Gen Z, and now Generation Alpha, they are somehow more open to the world, so they have become more sensitive to things, and they are less driven by ambitions. So that makes them more anxious too. And because of the social media, it's kind of reality has been splintered. So that feeds into this anxiety. And of course, as the situation goes worse and worse with animal rights or with the climate, I mean, we can read about it every day in the newspapers. So that produces a lot of anxiety, especially in the young generations. And and how there's this New York Times bestseller, Jonathan Safran Foer, who has said that the worst thing that science has ever done to humans is that it's kind of a bring out this the danger of climate change, because it's so hard for a fiction writer to bring it from that abstract world to front of our eyes that captivates our imagination and our heart. And yes, so for the climate change thriller, I realized that I need to have some, in a plot line, I need to have something bad happen. But it's not enough to have like a hurricane or something. You have to really give it a political circumstances, and then also danger in the sense of like the power of the governments. And so it has to work in like or like inside the person, then between a relationship with people, and then with a relationship with the individual and the society. And so that's how I came up with the plot line, and it involves U.S. government, and there's a conspiracy. And so it's a very, both of the book number 2 and 3 are very tight thrillers. So it's as it talks about very important issues. I think it's also quite entertaining, because it's quite fast paced, but based on reality. So
Nice, nice, nice.
You can kind of learn and entertain yourself at the same time.
Sounds good. Sounds good. That was actually a question I was about to ask. Since you're an activist, you are interested in action, and but a book is not exactly an action. But now I understand that the book is to inspire people to talk to the government or to realize that they must take action. So it's more an inspiration that should lead to action.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And I give a kind of hypothetical world or world where you can see that, when you take action, that it can lead to good results.
Okay.
And anyway, my view is that we need a systematic change, and systematic change can only come when people wake up and see the reality.
Agree.
Because especially nowadays, people are so self-absorbed and the splintered perspective of the world and everything. So it's like you have to open their eyes.
That's nice. Yeah, that's the hidden job of artists. Nobody talk about that. How crucial artists are to reveal aspects of reality, the reality, and yeah,
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that's what artists should do.
thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we are a podcast which is focused on the relationship between humans and food systems, a question we ask all the guests on the show is, what kind of food do you like?
Well, I'm a old school vegetarian, so I love the taste of vegetables. I
Okay.
steam it, and organic vegetables mostly,
Nice.
but nowadays I mean, we travel a lot, and nowadays you're going to get vegan food anywhere, and I think the vegan cuisine is actually the most interesting right now, because it's kind of in the last 5 or 7 years, it has created this new palette, a totally new palette which didn't exist before. So and they have found combinations and created things that didn't exist before, and I think nowadays you can find so good vegan food, if you like fine dining, that's available in all the big cities in the world, and or also very simple dishes are easy to make, and it's not only, of course, that it's good for the environment, but it's very good for your health too.
Nice. A question I have. Do you find it easy to find restaurants which have vegan options, or even vegan restaurants you find you find them easily?
Yeah, there's an app called Happy Cow, and why is the cow happy is that he's not going to be slaughtered. So that's why it's called Happy Cow app. And you can find it. It's www.happycow.com, and you can find in anywhere in the world you can find vegan-friendly restaurants nowadays.
Okay,
So
good to know. Good to know. Nice. I'm gluten free, so yeah. So let's say I'm jealous of you vegans. It's
yeah,
you
yeah, that's also quite difficult. But now it's getting easier to find gluten-free food. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. It's easier. Not so. It doesn't seem as easy as you say for vegan, but yeah, that's why I was surprised.
Yeah, yeah. No.
Nice. And so we come to the end of the episode. Any advice you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so, well, You can find my books in Amazon by the name of Rise Up Trilogy, but also I have made...
we put everything in the show notes, of course, as well as the app you mentioned. So
yeah, okay. But also I have made podcast, serialized audiobook podcast. So you can listen to it in all the major platforms, music.
what is the name? So we can.
It's the Rise Up Trilogy.
Okay.
Is the name of the podcast, and under it you can listen to the 3 books for free.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so I have no excuse. I was since the start of the episode, I was like, I have so much on my reading list. When am I going to read it?
Yeah.
You made it easy.
Yeah. No, that's an option, and of course, I think it's also if Spotify or Apple, if you are a subscriber, it's included there, so you can actually listen to the whole book. You know, if you have subscription.
Okay.
So,
I'll put the links, direct links, so it's easy for people to find it and listen to it.
yes.
So, any advice?
Any advice? Yes. I think this changes. You don't have to become a vegan overnight, but just become aware. It's a baby steps. And I don't believe in guilt tripping or virtual signaling. So educate yourself. You can educate yourself in so many ways. You can check documentaries, or there's plenty of them in YouTube, or read non-fiction or even fiction nowadays. And yes, educate yourself. Become aware.
Okay. Well, duly noted. Thank you so much for spreading awareness, and that's really nice. And thank you so much for joining our show, for taking the time to join our show today.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. It was a pleasure to be in your show.
Thank you, Enrik.
All right.
Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey with Enrik today on Sharing is Caring. We hope you found inspiration in the powerful themes of the Rise Up Trilogy, where real-world issues like climate change, animal rights, and social equity are woven into compelling young adult fiction. Enrik's transformation from vegetarianism to veganism, driven by his bond with his dog Ella, sheds light on the cognitive dissonance in our treatment of animals, challenging us to reflect on our own choices and their impacts. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. We love hearing your thoughts and insights. Your engagement helps us continue to bring meaningful stories and discussions to the forefront. Until next time, keep caring and keep sharing.